Hello everybody, John Craig here with Performance Plus Tennis, and today I have a special guest. This is Gavin MacMillan, and he is the technique coach for Aryna Sabalenka. And I am thrilled to have him here with us here at the Performance Plus channel. Welcome.
Thanks.
And tell me a little bit about your background and how you got involved with Aryna and so forth.
My background, I grew up in Toronto. I was playing hockey predominantly. Played high school sports like everybody else did, and that was my obsession. So baseball, basketball, volleyball, those type of sports. We were doing a lot of running, jumping. Anyway, after 16 years old, I was pushed out of hockey by my father and sent off to a tennis academy. And it was called the All-Canadian Tennis Academy in London, Ontario. And to be honest, it was like a horrifying experience. Like, I wasn't a very good tennis player, but I was fast, so I could try to pretend to play. But it was super humbling because you realize the amount of skill that it takes to play the sport. And you're a decade behind all these other kids, and
Sure.
I was more athletic than them, but catching up technically was a challenge. And there was always this struggle, like with tennis, like why could I throw a baseball that well, but I couldn't serve? And after I got done playing college, I really started trying to understand like what I had failed at and why, and what I could have done differently. And being in the coaching side of it, you're trying to be the best you can and help the people that you can to the best of your ability. And once I started seeing like serves like Sampras, who obviously I'd watched play live many times, and really understanding what he was doing anatomically, you saw that the way he served is really not any different than somebody who throws a baseball at 100 miles an hour or a quarterback that throws. There's certain things in terms of internal rotation of the right arm, what the left arm's doing, how it creates torque in the spine, those type of things that really stood out to me. And then if you started showing people that, it became kind of simple. And then I've done some work with a guy named Dusan Vemic. He's a really good coach out of Serbia. He's done a lot of work with their Davis Cup, Fed Cup teams. He worked with me with Brandon Nakashima as well. And he introduced me to Aryna's team when she was struggling.
Gotcha.
With her serve.
Gotcha.
So that's how that happened.
Gotcha. When it comes to the serve, a lot of people would say that her toss is too high. There's a lot of different philosophies out there. What is your position on ball toss height on a serve?
It's a symptom. It's not the problem. Is something completely different. And so the reason her ball toss gets high is because now, if you look at her motion closely, when she starts shifting her weight back, and sometimes when she's tighter, her arms are kept in front of her, so her weight's back, but her arms haven't caught up. So now, and she has a pinpoint stance, so then she steps up, her arm's now going back as her body's going forward. So the only way she can catch up to it is if she keeps the ball toss high. And it's obviously still part of the thing we're trying to work out, but people have to realize like the limited amount of time when you're trying to play on the tour that you have to actually fix these things.
Right.
You can see that like she had so many things wrong from the beginning with her toss arm, what she was doing with her right arm. And is it perfect? No. But is it 100% better? Yeah, it's a lot better.
Yeah.
When she's in practice and she gets really fluid with her take back, her weight shift is all together. She keeps the wrist angle at the neutral and at the right angle. Her toss isn't high. Because obviously if the ball's dropping too much like that, any type of hesitation, especially under those types of pressure, can cause a problem.
Yeah. You see most of the WTA players actually have high ball tosses, and I think it's probably for similar reasons, right?
It's never it's obviously a problem, but just telling him, in Aryna's case, if you try to drop that toss, the serve's going to be worse.
Right.
Because her arm can't catch up in time. When she's doing the right things with her wrench, she knows this. Like, when she's doing the right things with her motion and it's fluid, her ball toss drops a foot and a half. But, people always go back to what they know when the stress hits.
Sure.
And she's doing better and better at it. Like, for her to serve, 67% first serves and 0 double faults in a Grand Slam final from where she was is really a testament to the guts it took for her to face it, do the things on a day-to-day basis to try to change it. This last off season, was one of the better experiences I've had in my career in any sport, and I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of different athletes in different sports. Her commitment to really coming out every single day and getting better, whether it was with the shape on her forehand, understanding the shot selection, really, really impressive 3 weeks. So it was great to see, that it paid off.
Yeah.
Because at the top levels, as you know, like, it doesn't always pay off. I mean, you look at Novak at Wimbledon last year, and one of the few times you see he's really choked away a Grand Slam final. Right?
Sure.
And that's the best player ever.
Sure.
This is a difficult sport. Somebody else is trying to beat you, expose the flaws you have.
Yeah.
And the stress of the moment can cause a lot of things. And obviously he bounced back great at the Open. But for her, I think that if she can just keep working on things on a day-to-day basis the way she's really approached this in the last couple months especially, she's really in a good position to have not only a great year, but I think the next 4 or 5 years, because ball striking wise, she's elite, obviously.
Totally.
And that's not going anywhere. So it's just will come down to continuing to improve her movement, keep improving the technical side, and not just her serve. The bigger change for her since we started is her forehand, for sure.
And what did you really do to change your forehand? What did you see that it needed, and how did you change it?
Well, the footwork wasn't right, but it was linear. So everything was really back and forward, right? She wasn't getting her arm coiled here. She wasn't getting the racket head vertical enough times to where, so if the racket's vertical, then the hand can roll around the wrist, the forehand rolls around the elbow, and the humerus rolls around in the shoulder, and it whips out. And then from here at contact, she's really gotten a lot better at coming this way as opposed to driving it. And if you do that, you're actually decelerating by definition. So you're slowing down. Your arm has to be able to go that. If you come this direction, your arm can accelerate. So you'll see every elite forehand does that. And now, like last year in the final against Roddick, her forehand was the difference. Like the heavy, deep forehand that you can make under pressure, right? That puts the pressure on your opponent. That's the shot that wins tournaments. It's not the freaky Alcaraz winners that he's so capable. What he does to you, extraordinarily well, is puts you under pressure with his your basic rally shot, whatever you want to call that shot. You can make when it matters. And now she's got that, and it's the same thing off her backhand. If she gets too linear with that, she can start missing. When she gets her left hand through, it's a joke how well she hits it. And she's one of the few that can really go up the line well at any point, and it's not that risky of a shot for her. So forehand for me, it's, in the men, if you don't have a big serve and a big forehand, you're not in the top 70, something like that.
Sure.
You can't compete.
Yeah.
So the whole idea was developing this 1-2 punch. I think especially in the women, if you can hit the out wide serve well on the ad side and not just flat, be able to hit it with spin on a first serve that hits and goes away from the opponent. The percentage chances that you're going to get to be offensive off the next shot are super high.
Sure.
And, I don't know that, really she understood that until now. And now she's really, you could see there's pressure moments, what she was trying to do. And she's still new at it, but pulled it off on a big stage. So that's what I'm happy about. Like, you want to know that what we're trying to practice, that once you're put in an event, can you execute it?
Can you do it? Yeah.
And that's why I always say, like, this idea that this is mental with these players, like, I couldn't disagree with anything more. Yeah, tennis is a mental sport, but your mind knows whether or not you can execute something,
right,
or whether you can't. And if you can't, the pressure of the moment just makes it worse. But it's still not something you can execute. All you have to do is look at free throw shooting in basketball. If Shaquille O'Neal is standing on the free throw line with 4 seconds left in the game and has to win it, I don't think too many people are thinking that's going to be possible. If Steph Curry stands up there, obviously it's a lock. Well, the guy shoots 500 free throws a day. He's a 97% free throw shooter. He knows he can do this.
Sure. And
he can adjust on the spot. And so I think, like, for now, like, she's got a basic understanding of the shots she needs to do and how to adjust them when things aren't necessarily firing. Like, she played okay against Coco in the semis. There was a lot of emotion in that match, obviously. But when the when the things really hit the fan, she played unbelievable in tiebreak. So that's what you look for. Obviously, every game's not going to be perfect. We're going to have bad games here, but it's how you bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought she did it, outside of the Coco match, like, I would say it was mentally was a really good showcase of how far she's come in terms of understanding the adjustments she needed to make in those situations.
And the self-belief that comes from it. They really drive that home. I say if your fundamentals are solid and you believe in what you're doing under pressure, you're going to have confidence. If you don't know what you're doing and you're guessing, then you're going to fold under pressure.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So the whole and it eliminates this idea of like that it's so so mental that so many coaches are putting across. Like, I think that does such a disservice to the players, because what you're essentially saying is that you can't correct the flaws that you see, so therefore the excuse that they're losing must be mental. Are there mental challenges to tennis? Of course there are. But if you don't have the skills to execute shots, it doesn't matter what your strategy is.
Right.
Strategy doesn't exist.
Right.
Because you can't hit an out wide kick serve at down break point in the fifth set. So what does it matter?
Sure.
And she didn't have a kick serve. So now we've got a fairly consistent kick serve, and when she hits it well, it's elite. Like we practice with men, and they struggle with it. So having the confidence to be really aggressive with it, like, I think that's an evolving thing, and it's gotten a lot better. But even key moments in the final where there was some stress, she still was able to execute it, and that's what I'm looking for.
Sure.
When we first started before the U.S. Open, and she had to play Swiatek in the semis, I mean, Arena will tell you the same thing. She lost that match. Swiatek
didn't beat her. She didn't beat her. No. Right.
But she didn't, and in fairness to Arena, she had a total of 7 days to try to fix a serve motion and completely change it. And now you got to play a Grand Slam. Like, it's not simple. And now she's had more time, and specifically the time we had in Dubai this year was really effective. And I'm super proud of her, of how she approached it, because you look at these people that have to be in these situations and the amount of noise that is around it and how to silence all that. The only thing you really can control is yourself and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to be able to handle that moment.
Sure, right? Sure.
And where she was in doing that to now, even difference from the U.S. Open to Australia is night and day.
Yeah.
So,
looking back, kind of going back a little bit, you mentioned Pete Sampras, who had obviously an amazing serve motion and a great serve. And there's so much talk in the tennis world now about pronation or long axis rotation of the ball. And when he served, it looked like he did it with a very high sense of purpose, like it was very deliberate. Do you think that most of the high performance players on the tour are deliberately trying to activate that pronation to get more acceleration through? Is that something that's just happening by itself, or is it something they're intentionally trying to do?
I think when you first learn it, it's definitely intentional. Obviously, the level he got it to, it's a conditioned reflex. Obviously, I've studied Pete's serve. I've known him for a long time. Like, I don't know him that well, but I've met him several times, and I've studied his serve motion probably more than anyone's. Same with Roddick's. They're actually almost identical in terms of what the left arm does, what the internal rotation of the right arm does. So the pronation can't happen if your arm doesn't get rotated properly here. You don't get proper stretch reflex in your pec, and if this doesn't rotate in here, right? So if it doesn't come in here, you can't get it to come there and then this direction. And a lot of these servers now, and Sinner's getting better at it, but like Alcaraz goes away and in, so he loses the stretch reflex, but he's strong enough that he muscles it. Listening to Kyrgios's, I really like his shows and stuff, but I couldn't disagree more with what he's saying about Becker's, era, or, first of all, no one on tour to this day can serve like Pete Sampras.
Right.
There isn't one.
There's not one.
Not one. Right. Nor Roddick. So I was at Indian Wells when Roddick played Sampras 20-something years ago, and you were like, oh my God, that's a bomb. That's not, it was 140.
Right.
Who's serving 140? Nobody is. Yeah. And remember, it's not just that you're hitting 140. Pete's accuracy was unbelievable, and he essentially had 2 first serves. So he wasn't this extreme kick. It had more spin on it, but that ball exploded at you. And one of the things I've been drilling into Arena's head is, look, hitting a hard flat serve, just because it's 120 something doesn't mean anything. The ball skips and it's right in your strike zone. So people like Schweitek want that.
Sure.
What I want is the ball here and up, because it gets it out of their strike zone, and now no matter what happens, we're getting a weaker return,
Sure.
and we can attack it. So if you keep that in your mind, and especially if you're hitting out wide on the outside, out wide on the deuce side, which for a right-hander are, to me, the two most important serves, and then we have to obviously keep them honest going up the tee.
Yeah.
I think as Arena gets better at this, once she's able to be super confident on the deuce side, especially off the second, like going and attacking the backhand more, this just gets better. But if there's a better serve motion that ever existed than Pete Sampras's, I have never seen it. And the mechanics that I try to teach people are based off of his serve and also off of Roddick's. If I had started Arena when she was 14, I would have probably made sure she had a platform stance. Obviously, there's been great servers that have a pinpoint, but there's more moving parts. So there's more things that can go wrong, and the timing's a little harder. But even Isevic's serve was unbelievable. I think Sinner's gone back to pinpoint and out, but it's not the pinpoint that's making him effective. They've really made a huge change in how he brings
it in. Yeah.
Well, you have to get your palm down.
Right.
If you open it, right, your humerus rolls forward, it's muscled. So
yeah, and for those of you who are watching who have struggled with the waiter's tray serve, that's it.
Yeah.
As soon as you go here, you've lost the ability to have that internal rotation you need to bring through the contact.
Correct.
It's gone.
So I think that looking at this part, it's because of what they did to start.
Okay.
No different than a forehand, right? Like you can't, if you don't get here on a forehand, it's not really going to matter what happens here, And this idea that, well, as long as your contact point's consistent, you're going to be good. That's not true. In the men, if you can't rip it cross court, heavy with spin, repeatedly without missing, how are you playing?
Sure.
You're just going to get pushed around the court, and everybody can keep the ball in play. Everybody. Anybody inside the top 200 or whatever it is now, it's probably more than that.
Of course.
So like that, unless you can hurt them. And the idea is that you develop a foundational game of ground strokes that you can make that can hurt people. That doesn't mean you're hitting winners, right? You're getting them in uncomfortable positions so that you're getting weaker shots back, and that over time it breaks them down.
Right.
In the men, that's a 4 to 5 hour process, and it comes down to a couple points really in the end of it, right? Like the final of Australia this year, or even more. I think the actual best tennis that was played in the tournament was Vera's first 2 sets against Alcaraz.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's amazing.
85%, and I don't like his motion at all. I really think if they adjusted his second serve to where he has a super effective kick because he goes this way and in, and the mechanic of understanding what to do with the left arm, make sure it pulls and your right leg kicks. At 6'6", he should be able to kick it over your head almost every time. And then how do you go at the guy? Like he was, the first 2 sets against Alcaraz is the best tennis I might have ever seen, even maybe better than stuff Federer's done. Like he was hitting the ball so clean from the ground, and I don't know what you thought, but wow, and he just couldn't keep it up, with Medvedev. And
I picked him to win the tournament actually after
that match.
Yeah,
wow, like he really brought it, and I'm a fan of his. So like, you hope he can. He struggles with some physical issues, obviously not just the injury, but didn't seem to be feeling that great in the semis. And but I like his game. I like the way he tries to play. At 6'6", he's an unbelievable mover, and I really hope he continues to.
Yeah, you mentioned the left hand, and maybe we could just touch on that briefly on the serve, because it's something that most coaches don't even talk about, players don't think about. They're too busy thinking about everything here, where this should just be natural. I don't even think about this. This just follows this one. Correct. This one's sort of the leader. That's what I teach, is that left hand is the leader all through the whole movement. It leads me into and out of every position, and it dictates the timing.
Forehand, on the serve, it's the same thing.
Exactly.
So the one thing I started noticing when you start going through videotape of all the elite servers over the last 30 years is, we're all taught to toss like this. Well, like Sampras was here, Federer's here. But more importantly, when they get it to release, the arm is actually that way. not that way. And I was like, wait a minute, that's how you pitch. Your arm's here, it's not here.
Sure.
I'm like, and that's what creates the torque in the spine, because what happens is your scapula now rolls up, and now you can pull it to here, right? So it becomes this motion. If you go this way, the left arm goes that way, which Arena used to do, and still does sometimes, and it pulls your right arm down with it and your head. So now it's over. So now you're hitting in a flat plane instead of an upward plane.
Right.
So because it should be an exchange like this.
Right. It's like a seesaw.
Yeah, and you have to have the left arm on the right side of the head, because what that causes is counter rotation of the upper spine to the lower spine and the left hip. So it creates that rotation, right? And then the other difference in serving is that you also have to have extension and then flexion of your spine. So it's two sources of power for you. And so that's where the back flexes back, now up, but also around. So if you get the arm here, that fixes almost all of that.
Yeah, the way I teach it is if they get the left hand to do what it's supposed to do, and I think I'm the only one on the channel on YouTube that's ever said that you come up and you turn the hand. You have to turn the hand.
I've taught that now how long? Every single person I teach, it's here.
Yeah.
Because you have to get it inverted. But once I saw that, it was such a frustrating moment because I've been taught so poorly. Because it's made so much sense, because that's how I threw a football and a baseball and those things I excelled at. And I always struggled with serve, and like it just, nobody could explain it to me. And that was tough because you're capable of doing something with it. When I first tried serving, to me it was like a jump serve in volleyball. That you tossed it up, you leaned back, and you went up. Then I was told down together, up together, scratch.
Oh, that stuff. Oh, that nonsense. Yeah, right.
It's terrible. And like now, you're serving under 100 miles an hour. You can't kick a serve. You're double faulting all the time. Your confidence sucks. And it's just an example of, then people just saying, oh, it's mental. He's mental. He's upset. He's like, well, first of all, I'm hyper competitive. I hate losing. And so, yeah, of course I'm upset. I'm not going to go along with this.
Sure.
Right? I'm glad to hear that. You don't see a lot of it, people. I had a really nice conversation with Goran Ivanisevic in Dubai this year, because I was asking him, I often see you like with Novak, and you just keep telling him keep his chin up. And the reason I'm asking is obviously we still have a problem. Sometimes Arena pulls her head down, but for me it's her left arm, and she goes back to that habit of that way, because the arm, it can't go straight. It has to come straight down like this. It can't, otherwise it's just pulling the right shoulder. And he said, no, I agree with you. It's the left arm has to go that plane, but with the player, sometimes you got to trick him into getting him to do what you want. And some things with him, like it's better if I verbalize it that way. That makes more sense to him, even though what I'm really trying to get him to do is keep his arm here. Because if you watch Novak serve, like a lot of times when he's tight, the ball drifts forward and he pulls down. And so
that's when he nets it.
Yeah,
that's when he nets it.
And I've said this since how many times when people ask, when Novak serves well, he's not beatable. Obviously that's going to change now, but as he's getting older. But the last 5 years, when his serve's on, it's done because he's breaking it.
Right.
It's just a function of time, right?
Sure.
So for me, everything starts with the front side. That's where the power comes from on almost every shot. And if you don't understand that piece, then you're focusing so much on what the right arm does, and it's more along for the ride. So you want to be able to create a whip action. You can't tell somebody to whip their right arm. That's not what happens. The torque in the spine creates the whip in the right arm.
And the left hand sets that up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't, because if you don't get the left hand over here, this shoulder can't get loaded by that leg. You're already open. So all you can do is spin, right, this way. And there's not really, it's not repeatable under pressure, and you won't be able to get the proper drive and trajectory on it. And again, the ground stroke, same thing. You've got to get them to bounce and accelerate off the court and out of the strike zone. It's why Nadal's so tough to play.
Sure.
RPMs on his ball are a joke.
Crazy. Yeah, and I think that, when I'm teaching foundational skills, I do try to get the player to follow it out, because I want them to use this muscle to drive through I don't want them to just arm it. But once the fundamentals in, then they can release it.
Yeah, and it has to roll over because the way our arms built, we have two bones on this. And so when you look at people that punch really hard, and I've worked a lot in the fight business, so the amateur fighters, when we get them, they're spinners. So they just do this and this, and they're trying to outpoint people. There's no power on it. But when you watch the elite punchers, right, they sit down and their shoulder will roll over their front leg, the right one will. And this rotates. And because this is so fast, right? So when you watch old martial arts guys that are really quick in here and the amount of power they can deliver, it's crazy. Well, tennis is the same thing. Off a forehand, now it's rotating that way, right? And obviously you don't want it here. It's being dragged once you unwind it, right? So it unwinds to here, and now it's going to drive through here. And the only way to maintain acceleration is to let it roll over.
Let it go. Yeah.
If you go straight through it, you have to put the brakes on it. And in men's tennis and women's now, you can't do that. The ball won't have acceleration. And as we all know in this business, if you can't accelerate a contact, you're dead in the water as a professional.
Sure. There's also, a common thing that's been on, online for years. It's the idea of lag and snap on the forehand. Is that something you even think about, teach? No, right?
No, because what you're seeing the right thing, but explaining it wrong. That's the way I would say that. So it's not a lag, it's an unwinding of the arm. It's just no different than pitching. Once in pitching, you'll drop the arm, it'll come back here, it comes up. Is it lagging? Yeah, it's lagging, but not unintentionally. It's not voluntary.
Right.
It's involuntary. And it's the same thing with forehand. If you get in the right position here, then as your left shoulder opens, right, this is going to start unwinding. And now it can accelerate to contact because it has stretch reflex in the shoulder. You don't have to muscle it. If I go this way, I have to pull this instead of letting the pec have a stretch reaction and then be able to accelerate it. It's the difference between what you'll call a fluid forehand and one that's muscled.
Muscle. Yeah.
So no, I would never teach somebody to lag it. You want that to happen because they set up properly.
And they've got the right degree of lack of tension, if you will. The right lack of tension, and it just happens to happen.
The only tension that happens is that impact, right? If it's before, then you're in trouble because that tension is going to show up in the bad moments, right? Where now you get a little tight in this, like you don't know when to pull this trigger. Whereas here, once you are internally rotated and this contracts, all you have to do is let it drop and it'll do its job for you, right? If it goes this way, I have to have tension now and I have to muscle it all the way through. It doesn't work.
You're raising your elbow like Pete Sampras used to raise his elbow on his forehand.
Everywhere. Is there a better on the run forehand than he had?
Never.
Absolute rocket.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the best athletes that's ever played this sport. Phenomenal balance, not good. Like if you go and watch the exhibition, he played 5 years after retiring with Federer. I mean, come on, man. Like, the skill that he brought, and I think maybe if he was a little more aggressive like Federer got with his backhand later in his career. I mean, Federer had that early on. I really don't, I wasn't a part of any of his stuff, so you don't know where he started backing up and being more defensive with it. Because the minute they switched that, look what happened.
Yeah. 2017. Yeah.
You remember the match at, was it Indian Wells or Miami that he beat Nadal so bad? And Rafa just, shaking his head walking to the net. And it might be again, similar to Zverev's, 2 sets with Alcaraz, like just unbelievable, like from a ball striking capacity, winners, few errors. And Roger obviously had to have had great instruction when he was young. You don't figure all this out by yourself. It's too hard.
Yeah, that was 2017. He won the Australian Open, came back from down 1-3 in the 5th against Nadal.
Right.
Then he went out to Indian Wells, won that. Then he went to Miami and won Miami, won the Sunshine Double there too, awesome. And regained number one in the world. Yeah, I think everyone in my neighborhood was wondering what was all the screaming at 4:00 in the morning on that Australian Open final.
That was awesome. I loved because I woke up to watch the last 2 sets, and then he got down 3-1. I was like, oh no. But if you look at when he got down break points serving for it, right? Served out wide, and it was just obviously he's done this so many times and just ran around and hit that inside out forehand winner to get back to deuce. And I was like, okay, I think he's got it now.
Yeah.
Because like to pull the trigger at that moment like that, like wow, so great to see.
Yeah.
I was so bummed when he lost the Wimbledon final like that year to Novak.
2019, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah, because like he played so well and just 1 point
Well, he was up 40-15.
Yeah,
he should have just gone for 4 first serves in a row.
I think so too.
And just gone for it. He did. Yeah. So.
But obviously, he thought differently, and I think he's a little better decision maker than I am. So.
Yeah, and that's a 2-slam swing, right?
No, it is.
It is, because if he had beaten Novak, he would have jumped ahead by two. Would have been a 2-slam swing. By losing it,
yeah, for sure.
Whatever, it's all history.
Yeah, it's history.
But yeah, so lots of great information.
Oh,
really appreciate you coming out and spending the time. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
I've been coaching for over 40 years, but I'm still trying to be a sponge and learn.
Well, me too.
And
I've been fortunate with the people I run into. Grakovetsky, I don't know if you've looked at his stuff in the Spinal Engine. He's a nuclear physicist out of Montreal.
I have not.
Great guy, too. I don't know that he's still around. Like, I was fortunate to meet him in 2012. He did his presentation to Harvard in 2008. He had a back injury, 11 different diagnoses as what was wrong. He's like, come on, something's wrong with this. And once I saw his presentation, everything fell into place in terms of like understanding the power and the important role that the spine plays in it. The arm is virtually useless without it. And as a former athlete, you know that. Like your arm is along the ride to be accelerated. And you have to find a way to, create effortless acceleration because the mass of the racket is set, right?
Right.
So the only thing you can change is how fast that's moving or the string tension. And that's what creates, more force at impact. Well, when you see the side flexion, extension, flexion, but also the rotational power and how the body moves, like I had always seen it, I couldn't explain it. And he explained it. And then now I could put it into a context where you can explain it to somebody else. And it became very simple. Like if you're tossing here, there's no counter rotation anymore of your spine. It's over. Mm-hmm. So the only thing you can do now is pull down and muscle. That's it. If you're over here, now we're in the conversation of getting proper counter rotation of the upper spine. And if you do that, now you can become an elite thrower, which is what serving is. It's throwing. It's just the plane of movement is up. Baseball is down. Mm-hmm. Football's flat. So,
yeah, there are definitely coaches out there that say, "Oh, throwing and serving are nothing alike." But I've always used to found.
If I have to hear that, like I just get up and walk out. Like, To say it's not a throwing motion is just pure. Like,
what could it possibly be?
It is absolutely that, and I can 100% prove it.
Sure, likewise.
And I've worked with elite NFL quarterbacks, elite Major League Baseball pitchers, and now obviously elite tennis players, and I teach the exact same thing with the front arm. It's just a different plane of movement. But what the arm is doing on the front side for sure controls the backside.
I think of it.
Any one of the coaches that I've been fortunate enough to be around that understood it in baseball and football, they all say the same thing.
Sure.
The ones that aren't teaching it that well, they're not saying that because they don't take the time to understand it. And it takes time. You have to want to be really good at this. You have to really want to impact your players first and foremost. Most of what's happening now you see is all just social media trying to draw attention and to yourself with whatever information you're spewing out there. Not did you take the time to study this. The coach out of Croatia that I speak to a lot, he went to the French Open, I think it was in 2009, and they were still letting them film all the players. And you should see the database of serves that he's, and the list of players. And that's how, we say it a different way, right, but we're saying the same thing. And so it was really refreshing last year when we were in Dubai to speak to him, and he helps catching off a lot. And there's people out there trying to be great at this. And, that because you know how hard or how much effort it took to understand.
To gain understanding.
Well, I had wanted to because I couldn't understand why I couldn't do it at a better level. And it really frustrated me, and seeing that people that weren't as athletic were doing it better. And, I'm so competitive and still am that I just wanted to understand it. And then coaching, I don't want to teach it wrong.
Sure, exactly.
And imagine the repercussions if you go in and you're working with the pros whose career's on the line and you make it worse. Like, you'll never work in this business again. Right?
Sure.
So you better be right. And So you try to listen to what people are saying, but you know there's certain principles that have to be there, right? And if they're not, then you're not going to do this very well.
Sure.
And that's what I look at first, and then you go from there and you start, filling it in.
Yeah. I think of the left hand on the serve as being like the rudder that steers the boat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's an analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, very much. And I totally agree. And that's where we always start.
Yeah.
And where we're going to start today.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Terrific.
All right, man. Thank you.
Great to have you out here.
Yeah.